Hey there, and happy Easter Monday. If you're here, that means that you recognize that it's Monday, so it's a new week, and we're gonna have a new week of devotionals kicking it off for you. So remember to come back here Monday through Saturday at noon to check out the videos on this page. This is a sermon series, or the devotional series that I'm really excited about that we're doing. It's Messianic prophecies, and so what we're going to do is take a look at the Old Testament and see the writings that are specifically about Jesus, the writings that are given to us that say this is who Jesus was expected to be, this is who Jesus is, and this is why that's so cool today in the midst of a world that is filled with uncertainty and a lack of stability and fear and isolation, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, just the world in this current state, and why Jesus being this person, Jesus, is so important to us today, why the characteristics of Jesus and the understanding of who he was to the early society can maybe help us out in our society today. So the verse that I have for you today is in Isaiah chapter 9. It's Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6. A little context for you. This is the book of Isaiah has a lot of prophecy in it. It's all about Jesus and it's all about the coming of him. And a lot of it has to do with his birth and his death. And so specifically this passage talks about his birth a little bit as well as some of his rule. But you have passages like in Isaiah 52 where it talks about his death, the suffering servant passage, and this is meant to be just a glimmer of hope, because the time that Isaiah wrote this book was among the worst time for the Israelites. They were being in captivity as a nation by the nation of Assyria, and so Assyria was like the worst of the worst people. So imagine like literally like Nazi Germany is the only modern comparison that we can draw to the Assyria back in the day. So imagine this is the context where this passage is being written about Jesus. It says, for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And this is a passage that is really powerful because of all the names that they give Jesus. So first of all, the way that this is structured in the original Hebrew text is that government is the first word in that sentence, and Hebrew is kind of just odd because just it's a foreign language to us, and it winds up like doing weird grammatical structures. Ancient languages don't really follow our typical sentence structure for 21st century English, but it winds up being government is the first word of this, and everlasting Father winds up being the last, and shoulder is kind of near the end there. It's just a really weird thing, but the purpose of that is that it's meant to show that these are meant to be encapsulated in that idea of government, that these attributes are about Jesus as a governing ruler, that there is a purpose for that word there. And so when we look at these words, we look at them in that context, that wonderful counselor. Well, a lot of times we think of a counselor as somebody that I pay probably too much money to, not actually too much money, but I pay a lot of money to sit into a room and to sit on a couch and tell me why I'm in love with my mother or something like that. But we wind up thinking of a counselor more of like a moral guide. And yes, Jesus is that, of course, but what it means in this specific context is that Jesus is a wonderful counselor in the government, in the political term, because counselor is also a position in politics. Counselor is also, you have to counsel, and if you want to lead, you have to arbitrate, and you have to fight for your laws, and you have to do all these things. So wonderful counselor actually points to the Messiah as the king who carries out his action. It's not referring to him as a moral teacher, which we know that Jesus winds up being, but it points to him as king, as a wonderful counselor, as a wonderful politician. Isn't that an oxymoron? And then mighty God. This is a term for divine power. So the word mighty is translated a lot of different ways in the Hebrew. I think they got it right. I think that's a really good translation for that. But this word that they use for mighty also comes up in a lot of other passages. The one that stuck out to me the most is it could also mean champion, And specifically in 1 Samuel, where David defeats Goliath, that same word for what they're saying the mighty God is being said about their champion, Goliath. And so when you think of that, I mean, that just puts it into so much bigger scale. About mighty doesn't necessarily, mighty means strong, but mighty means forceful, mighty means champion, mighty means so much more than what meets the eye. And it really emphasizes that characteristic of God, that he is mighty, he is champion, he is ruler, he is Lord, he is king. Everlasting Father. Well, whenever the Bible talks about fathers and what it means to be a father, it comes out with some characteristics of what we really hope that each father winds up being, and that is enduring and compassionate and protecting. And isn't that what we also want in a leader? I want a leader that has compassion on the poor. I want a leader that endures the hard times, that endures pandemics and finds ways to make our country thrive in this time. I want a leader that protects the people, that protects me, that protects my rights. I want these kind of things. So being an everlasting Father who puts him in that position as well, that he's not only mighty and authoritative, but that he is loving and compassionate and caring. And lastly, he's the Prince of Peace. And these words, Prince of Peace, imply that his rule will bring a wholeness and well-being in individual society. And man, doesn't that sound like what we really need right now? A little bit of community, a little bit of wholeness to both me as an individual as well as to us as a society. And what I look at when I see all of these words is that these four characteristics really define the nature that we know of as God. There are three omni words that we use. They're Latin words. One of them is omnipotent, and omnipotent simply means all-powerful. And when I think of these four words, I can't help but think of omnipotence, because what kind of person do you think would be able to carry this out unless they were anything but omnipotent? And so this passage is pointing towards Jesus, who is the incarnate God, the Word that lives among us, who is omnipotent in all his rules, and he is a wonderful counselor, and he is a mighty God, and he is an everlasting Father, and he is a Prince of Peace. And if he is all those things, then what more could we possibly ask